Welcome to the podcast, Raw Lessons Revealed. I'm your host, Craig T. Ingram, coming to you live from Austin, Texas. On this podcast episode, you are about to listen to raw, real, no-nonsense lessons from a gentleman who I have known for approximately 23-ish years. He has worked for companies that are at complete ends of the spectrum in business, such as a multi-billion-dollar Fortune 30 company and also venture capital supported companies starting out with 0 customers. And he has been very successful at both. He is a business strategist, but specifically a commercialization business strategist, who is currently the chief executive officer of a company called How to Start Up in MedTech. Did you know the accurate business statistics of the survival rate of a startup company, whether they are well-funded or not, is actually between 67% and 75%, depending on the source of industry data. Let's just say hypothetically that the statistics are overinflated and it's 55% instead of the 67 to 75%, which is still 20% less than the statistics we can find. But that failure rate is still more than half of companies. Let's learn why this is and why the statistics are so accurate when it comes to effective, or unfortunately too many times, ineffective commercialization that companies experience. Well, Steve, thanks for being on the program, Raw Lessons Revealed. Looking forward to chatting with you. You know, you and I have known each other literally since either 2000 or 2001. I think it was 2000 when we met at
That's
a
right.
national meeting.
No, I think we were teenagers back then.
Yeah, exactly. And gosh, I've been super thankful for you for decades, because not only have I learned from you of what to do, but also what not to do, right? And so you know, as I've been getting coached from these 8, 9, and thankfully a handful of 10-figure liquid net worth business entrepreneurs, I see a common theme, right? And it really comes down to one thing and one thing alone, and that is effective commercialization. You could have the best product, the best service in the world, and if you can't commercialize it well, you're not selling any product, you're not making any money, the business is failing, and you're literally living under a bridge, right? So I'm gonna ask a very controversial question right up front. From your perspective, why do you think commercialization is the most difficult and unproductive part of business, where people just can't figure out the art of it?
Yeah, so I think that's a question that's probably got about 30 different answers. But let me get to some of the meat of some of the ones that I've seen where it doesn't work. I think the most basic rudimentary thing is most people don't understand commercialization. They mix up commercialization and handing a product to sales reps. They just think that, you know, if you hire enough reps, direct or indirect, give them, you know, a brochure and some assets and a nice video, and give them your product, then they'll just go out and sell it, right? They'll just sell the shit out of it. I mean, there's nothing more wrong with that. People don't understand that commercialization isn't just sales, right? That's number one. So I think that's one of the biggest problems, that they don't fundamentally understand the word commercialization, and they mix it with sales. So that I would say that's number one. I don't know if you agree.
Yeah, 100% agree with that.
Okay. The next problem that happens is people don't, or they massively underestimate, when they do then understand commercialization, they massively underestimate the lift. They massively underestimate how much time it takes, how many human resources it takes, how many professional advisors it takes. They don't realize that.
Yeah.
And then the number one thing is they massively underfuel it, right, with the cash. They don't set aside. A lot of startups that I see, when I see their business plans, it's like commercialization is sort of like 30% of this. And really, it should be 80% of the money and the resources and the time and the effort and the lift. So you get that kind of combination effect starting to happen with little understanding, and therefore, and then you underfuel it. Well, you just set yourself up for failure, total and utter failure.
Yeah. It's interesting because one of my business coaches is Adam Coffey, really the second most sought after CEO in private equity right now in the world. And I meet with him roughly, once every 6 weeks or so. And when he showed me some data on the successes of businesses, now I only have US based data, but 93.4% of businesses never make it to $1 million of USD currency. They never make it to $1 million in a 12-month period, whether it's a fiscal year or a calendar year. So that means only 6.6% of companies ever make it to $1 million out of 32.9 million registered companies in the US. Registered meaning, LLCs, C Corp, S Corp.
Sure.
So since that is the accurate data from the US Department of Treasury, then the Small Business Association, commercialization is probably one of the things that people literally do not obsess over, which is what they should be obsessing about, right? And because that statistic is so alarming, there's so much stress, anxiety, sadness, anger, because they're not meeting their forecasts. Partly, I think, because the forecasts are unrealistic, to be quite honest with you.
Yes.
But they're bringing all that anxiety, stress, and anger and frustration and everything into the home life because their commercialization is broken. There's too many holes in the boat, right? The Titanic is sinking, or at least taking on water, but the people are still playing the violins like there's nothing wrong with it, right?
Yeah.
What would you say out of the 10 components of commercialization, what would you say would be one of the biggest aha moments for an executive C-level leadership to go, this is what we need to focus on so that we don't become moderately effective, but we become really effective and ultra successful? What's your thoughts on that? I know that's a really heavy question.
It's a great question. It's a great question. And the reason I'm trying to think about it is because in different scenarios, I give slightly different answers depending on it.
Right.
I want to come back and say first that your numbers are right. And it's weird, right? So it's strange how those numbers exactly correlate to the percentage of failures of companies. And I think that's the people have got to realize that if you don't sell, you fail, right? So 90% of startups, over 75 to 80% of medical device startups fail. And they fail primarily because they can't commercialize. And to answer your question, why can't they commercialize? And there's 8 to 10 different facets, depending on how you divide it, of how you commercialize a product. But the fundamental for me is what I think most people get wrong. They just have a crappy product, right? They didn't think about commercialization at the outset. What they do is they wait and do commercialization once the product's ready for launch. And then they launch the wrong product. A product that either nobody wants, nobody needs, the pricing is completely wrong, the positioning is completely wrong. There's many ways that they can get it wrong. Quite often it's just fundamentally the product is not the right product because they didn't in the early days understand what do we need to do to commercialize this product and therefore build the right product for commercialization. And that's the backwards piece that just infuriates me when I see so many companies that build it and they will come. No. Work out how you're going to make them come, what they're going to buy, what they're going to price at, how much money can they actually spend? What's the, especially in something like a medical device where, they're constrained by how much money the system allows them to spend on it. And then all these things, you work backwards, right? And you come back and say, okay, so if we're going to build a product that fits all of those commercial parameters, what does that product look like? And I think that one of the biggest problems is we've got the whole thing backwards, where we end up all about technology, building a product, get the product. Then on the day of launch, we hand it over to a couple of sales guys and say, run with it. And then they can't understand why they can't sell it. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's kind of my sentiment of it.
Yeah, I mean, it actually does. I think what you're saying, it boils down to two things. The founders are in love with their product or service.
Yes.
They can't see the forest from the trees because they didn't do step number one in commercialization, which is market research.
Yes.
It's inadequate market research. They didn't spend enough time figuring out one of the four P. Does this fit one of the four P's in marketing of what somebody's going to pay for something to buy it, right?
Yeah.
And I've learned that so much from my business coaches as well, and even you, even back in the early days when we were at J&J, if people are not willing to take money out of their wallet to buy it, it doesn't matter how good the product is, right?
Yeah.
And market
you don't have a
research
business.
being
You
the
don't have a
first
business.
component of commercialization.
Yeah.
I just think there's inadequate and incomplete market research. What do you say?
And I completely agree. And again, where I also see a lot of people fail is they think they understand what market research is. And there's market research at different phases of product preparation.
Yep.
And also with after product launch, post-market market research is just as important as some of the pre-market market research.
Hey, that's my number 10 component for commercialization.
I know.
Post-market analysis.
Yeah, it's so important. And people forget it, right? And they lump the whole thing into, let's ask some people some very basic questions. And there are really good professionals and professional organizations out there who can make sure that they get you the answer from day one for the right point. So before you even set on the journey, before you let your R&D engineers loose with a spanner, right? What you've got to do is you've got to really deeply understand the problem you're fixing and what's the right solution in the right price point, in the right positioning, in the right competitive environment, all the good things that we know about commercialization.
Right.
That needs to be asked early on. Engineers are brilliant, right? They'll make what they think that you've told them to build, and they'll make it as to the best that they can.
Sure.
But if you tell them to build an apple and you really want them to build an orange, they will build a really good apple. Okay. So you've got to work out really early on in the process. What is the need I'm trying to build for here? What's the problem I'm trying to solve? But that's only half of the question. The second half of the question is, then what's the right product to solve that problem in the right way? Looking at price point and all those different things again. And I think that's the problem. People don't ask the professionals early on to help them to understand that. And the final sort of piece of the problem is often happens with clinicians in the field of medical devices. Is that they're a clinician, so they believe they have the answer in their head because it's solving their problem, right? And they're the one in a million clinicians that has that problem. But what they often do is they'll go to their friends and close confidants, and they'll basically say, hey, what do you think of my kids? Do you think my kids are beautiful? Right? And what the hell do you want your friends to say? No, your kid's damn ugly, I'm afraid. That is one ugly kid. I'm sure they're smart, I'm sure they're bright, but that is an ugly kid.
However, your really good friends that love you would actually say that.
Yeah, well, they would if they really, 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 but there's so few of them. So the problem is you can't go and ask your close buddies, hey, do you think this would be a great product? Because they'll just, first of all, they're not professionals and they won't know. You're asking them the wrong question. And thirdly, most human beings don't want to hurt your feelings. And they'll say, oh, that's a great idea. Yeah, it's brilliant. Yeah, I can't wait. I'll definitely buy that, right, in the future. So I think these are some of the fundamental problems that we have on the early stages of the market research or the market understanding or the market needs analysis, whatever you want to call it, right, at that early stage. Get a professional and get a professional to ask the right people the right questions. And you'll probably have a higher chance that the product, at least, that'll come out through your development process will be what the market's really looking for, needing for, can pay for, can be something that will solve a problem that really exists. And that's probably the first 10% of the battle of commercialization, that you've got a product that somebody cares about, wants, and is a possible fit.
Since you left your last role as chief commercial officer, you're now doing how to start up in medtech.com.
Yep.
And the course that you created from scratch, and this is just my personal opinion, I'm trying not to be biased, but there is nothing like it out there. There isn't. I mean, to my own dumb demise, I should have done that a long time ago. And I just think it's awesome. For the 800 roughly dollars that it costs, a founder, an entrepreneur, even an established company with C-level executives should be taking this course, because it is humanly impossible for them to know every little detail, micro level detail that you talk about. And that's what I love about your course. What was some of the driving forces that made you go, you know what? I've got to put something together, because people aren't getting it. They got the science of commercialization, but they don't have the art. And that is the difference between effective and ineffective.
Well, Percy, thank you. And I hope you're not telling me my kids are good looking just because, we're friends as well. So I'm joking. So,
well,
no, thank you. Yeah, one. I do appreciate it. And again, so what was my motivator for this? I think I'll start with the motivation for this. I've done this it's actually 33 years now that I've been doing this, and I've seen millions of hours of human life wasted. I've seen billions of dollars wasted. I've seen a hit rate that's atrocious, where we get 75 to 80% of startups fail. And having done so many startups over the years, I just see that most of that is because people are have-a-go heroes who actually don't know how to do it, right? And I see the same mistakes repeated time and time and time again. It's the same mistakes. You said it before, they put out super stupid stretch sales numbers that they're never going to hit in a million years, and they set themselves up for failure from day one.
It just blows my mind that people think that, they can grow 50% just because they're a startup, or grow 30%. I mean, obviously you want to grow 30%, keep your SG&A, as much under 20 as possible, so that you have that 10% or greater net EBITDA, right? But that is not the norm. If it was, 32.9 million companies would be way over $1 million.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
It wouldn't be 6.6% of them. It would be maybe
but that's
26.6, right?
And that's one error out of 1,000 that I sort of carry on my course, which is saying the reason why I can say this with certainty is because I've made those mistakes. I mean, and the course is basically, I would say 50% of it is just me admitting all the mistakes I've made in 30 something years. But eventually I got it right. Okay. And I built a unicorn, built one of, I think it's Europe's biggest ever unicorn. I was part of that built that. And that was building on the, and sort of part of me is as I'm going into semi-retirement, is saying, we can do better than this. And a simple way for us to go from 75% to 50% failure, which is still bad, right? But it's a big improvement, 25%.
Huge improvement.
It's just, stop the shit ideas at the beginning. Just stop them, kill them dead before they even get going. If that in my course just teaches people to do that, that's number one. But generally what it is I'm trying to take people, you said it beautifully. It's an art. This isn't a pure science. Okay. It's an art of the start. And in my mind, a lot of it is what I would call a dark art. It's like a lot of this is like, there's a couple of serial entrepreneurs who just know how to do this. They know how to do it time and time again. And I think I've distilled a lot of that down. And 50% of it is, don't make the stupid mistakes. Don't put your company in the wrong freaking town. Don't take money from the wrong people. Don't build the wrong product. There's a whole group of things that you can do. And what I've just really tried to do in that course is say, in completely brutal and honest terms, and you've been through the course, I don't pull any punches in the course.
That's why it's effective.
Yeah.
I mean, let's just call a spade a spade.
Yeah, let's talk straight.
I mean,
and I think that then in that course, then what I do is I just try and say, hey, here's 50% of this course is just avoid these things, at least 10 of them, and you'll have at least a chance of surviving. And on the other side, do these other things and do them well. And even if you get just 4 or 5 of them done well, you've got a better chance of surviving. And that's really what it is.
I mean, you are echoing. It's so funny because I'm not trying to, I don't say this out of vanity, but I'm just saying out of such immense thankfulness. There's 724 billionaires in the United States that can literally write a check for $1 billion and it not bounce, which is what I would call a billionaire, right? If you're not, if when people say they're a millionaire, can you write a check for $1 million without it bouncing? If you can't, then you're not a millionaire, right? And I look at these guys and I'm so impressed with how they built companies. Most of them from scratch. And most of them went bankrupt early in their, 30s and late 20s, right? And you're saying exactly what they're saying. It's like, I remember specifically when I sat down with Tim Gannon, who is a multi-billionaire, started Outback Steakhouse. He literally said to a handful of us, he said, guys, real financial business success is not necessarily knowing what to do. It's knowing what the hell not to do.
Yeah,
right. And
exactly.
That's what you're saying there. He's like, spend a little bit of money in the beginning, hire some people that aren't your friends who really know what they're talking about. And guess what? You're going to stack the deck in your favor to be financially successful through business. And that's exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
I mean, it's phenomenal.
And it's not just in startups. It's not just in business. It's in a huge amount of areas. One of the interesting things that I was told many, many years ago when I was talking about startups was actually because I live in Italy and I was talking to an Italian and they always think in terms of art, right? And what they were saying was that with the statue, when you look at a statue, it's not what's been added to the statue. It's what's been taken away. It's the stuff that gets taken away that leaves the statue. Okay. That's how a statue is made. And it's a bit like business. There's certain things you got to take away. And if you take them away with skill and art, you're left with a really good business. So it's the things that you're not doing, the things that you don't do, the things that you push to one side. I think part of the problem for a lot of really good business people is we have a super amazing can-do attitude and we can do anything. And again, and I'll come back to startups, but I think it's the same in a lot of businesses.
You're talking the established and
both. Yeah, both. There's an art in focus, right? There's a real art in focus. It's focusing on what to take away and focusing on what to do, and then not being tempted to come and bring those things that you took away and bring them back in because, well, we could do now. I've seen so many products where, if you look at the purest central product that they were going to build, it's really quite pure and quite simple and quite good. And then you see all the crap that they add back onto it because their engineers could. And then you end up with these sort of weird chimera products that just don't fit really anything. And they're trying to be everything. And now the price of them is so ludicrous that no one can buy. So again, the art is not doing things, but then not letting those things creep back in to then take you away from the focus of what you're doing.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. So from a standpoint of selling, right? Because that's what everybody thinks of in commercialization, right? And so even though it's way more than that, we've already talked about that at exhaustive already. What would you say the biggest mistake companies make in hiring salespeople? Would you say it's not hiring skill set? They're focusing too much on background in a certain category or widget, or a combination of both? What would you say?
Yeah, so I think that's a great question. So I think there's a couple of answers to that. So part of the problem is they don't hire natural salespeople. People buy from people. There's a thing where people buy from people, and some of the best sales reps out there, the customers want to spend time with them in their own free time because they are genuinely great human beings. Okay, and I think companies don't do that enough. Number one. The second thing that I see companies not doing enough is two types of training for the sales team. So the first thing is that they don't give them that sort of ludicrous in-depth training that people need. Okay. When you're talking to, and I'll talk in my field specifically, you're talking to a robotic surgeon, you better know more about robotic surgery than they do. Okay. And therefore, you need to know more about laparoscopic surgery, and therefore, you need to know more about open surgery. If you can go in there and just talk about your robot, you're not an asset to that customer. Okay, you're not having the right conversations with the customer.
That
You
would
are
be
just
because
talking.
somebody just hired somebody because they had robotic experience
Yes, yeah, exactly. So
versus
what
the
they do
skill
is,
set of understanding surgery.
yeah, exactly. So if you've got people that only know robotic, you've then got to build them and teach them about surgery and teach them about how to talk wider, how to talk to the C-suite, how to talk about healthcare, how to talk about patient episodes, how to talk generally and wide. And you've got to sort of embed that culture into them so that when they walk into the healthcare setting, they're seen as an asset, not as somebody coming to peddle a robot. Okay, there's one answer.
Yeah.
Um, the second thing that people don't train people is they don't train them how to sell. And I don't mean just the basics ABC of selling, always be closing and all that sort of stuff of selling. What I mean is how to manage their territory as a commercial business. Okay, they don't teach them how to plan a territory, how to run a territory, how to prospect properly, how to segment a territory. They don't give them all of those deep skills that people really need to run it like a proper business.
Right.
Okay. So you end up with what I call the bumblebee effect, which is basically, rep gets all wound up and excited, goes out and then just hops from flower to flower to flower to flower to flower, hoping they'll find some pollen there. And instead, I think what companies could be much better at is equipping them, obviously on the product knowledge and the procedure knowledge and all that, but really equipping them of how to be business entrepreneurs within their territory. That's what I think gets missed a lot.
I think you nailed it there. No, not that I think. You definitely nailed it there. With 1 minute left, what would you say is the raw lesson revealed to the C-level executives listening to this, to the entrepreneurs listening to this, the founders of startups, and even the mid-stage growth, small, medium enterprise companies, leaders and directors and VPs that are listening to this? What would you tell them is the most important raw lesson revealed from commercialization?
It's a profession. It's not a tag on that you have in your company. You have to get professional help strategies, and you have to commercialization is 80% of it, and it's a profession. You've got to have professionals deal with it.
So in other words, if you're not bringing somebody in who is obsessed with the whole pie of commercialization, not just a component, right? What I would consider one of the 10 slices of pizza, right?
Yep.
They're most likely going to be one of the 93.4% of companies that never reach where they even desire to go.
For sure.
How do people get a hold of you besides getting on howtostartupinmedtech.com?
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. So you can always email me at steve@howtostartupinmedtech.com. Okay. That's an easy way to get me. Or you can find me on LinkedIn. If you just put Steve Bell robotics, you'll find me. It'll pop up on LinkedIn. And then on my website, you've got all my contact details, including my own WhatsApp number. So you can get my WhatsApp number on there as well. And just you can literally reach out to me.
Beautiful. I purposely keep this podcast less than 25 minutes, somewhere between 20 and 25 minutes, because people just don't have a lot of time to sit and talk. And so that's why I just dive in. We get right to the meat of the matter. And I 100% know that people are going to re-listen to this and take notes and apply this stuff into their business. So thanks for being on today.
Thank you very much for having me. And I love the podcast. It's great.
All right. Talk to you soon. Wow. Well, those are our raw lessons revealed to us on this podcast episode from a man who clearly knows what it takes for a medtech or health tech startup company to commercialize their products with effectiveness. It doesn't matter if you're in the United States, Europe, Middle East, Asia. It doesn't matter if you're on one of the 7 continents. In order to commercialize a product or service effectively, there are specific things that you absolutely cannot do so that it won't paralyze you later on down the line. In order to make any type of authentic impact in business, one has to spend a lot of time in the off hours fine-tuning their craft. And in Steve's instance, I will use an analogy here where his craft was learning how to see and analyze the whole forest of commercialization, not just the individual trees that make up the forest. If the forest is the whole commercialization process of a company, each tree in the forest represents a specific component of the commercialization process. Can you see the forest from the trees? If you are leading and in the forest of your company, it is humanly impossible to be able to do that. That is why every single company needs to bring in someone from the outside who has proven themselves to be obsessed with effective commercialization, to be able to see where the gaps are, or what I call holes in the boat that are allowing ineffectiveness to seep into the company. Well, thank you for listening to this episode of the podcast. And please don't forget to like, make a comment, and give a 5-star rating to this podcast that you are listening to. And please hit that subscribe button so you get automatic downloads. We look forward to seeing you on the next episode of Raw Lessons Revealed.